All right. I am, again, and I say this a lot, and I do mean it sincerely every time I say it, is I'm very, very excited to have Stephen Farrell from Fathom join us because as we've been talking about all day, there's a host of innovations that are emerging. And one firm that caught my eye earlier this year in a great kind of context was Fathom, because when we talk about future of work and get esoteric and get what do you do with it? And yeah, I believe you all have taken not only a unique approach, but a uniquely valuable approach. So Stephen, thank you for rising up and deciding to share with us today. So if you would introduce yourself and a little bit about Fathom.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll really appreciate the opportunity to talk to the community. As Al said, Stephen Farrell, I head up the team here in the Americas for Fathom. I've been in and around future work pretty much my whole career, starting with one of the first cloud ATSs for staffing and recruiting, which was really changing that, and moving into kind of assessment software that was really trying to drive into how do we prepare our people for the future. And ultimately, I ended up at Fathom, which is it's taking a different perspective. Like rather than getting down to the individual, molecule or atom, it's kind of looking at it right. How can we get really good data to drive really good data-driven decisions?
Right.
It's tough because so many people are trying to crack that nut of like, well, what skills do my people have? What do they need for the future? What is that individual? And no one's really been able to do that for the past 40 years. So we're kind of taking a layer up, and it's really proving very fruitful. So I'm really excited to kind of walk through that with everyone today.
All right. You walk through it with us, and then I'll join you at the end for a Q&A. That sound good?
Fantastic. Looking forward to it. Excellent. Screen is up there. So basically, as I kind of talked about, we're Fathom. We're an Australian-based organization, but really making a lot of inroads here in the U.S. And I want to talk to you about some of the challenges that a lot of the partners and customers were facing, and kind of why they came to us and why they're continuing to use our platform. So let's start off with a little bit of a quote right here. So of the top 10 sources of innovation, employees are the only resource that you can control and assess that your competitors cannot. Right. So just kind of read that back again. It's the employees are the kind of key differentiator is what's being said here. Right. They're the only thing that you can continually improve upon and retain, and really that's your differentiator in the market. Right. If we look at technology, it becomes ubiquitous, right? It's something that you may have an advantage here or there, or maybe it's process. Like process was what made Toyota king, right? That was their process was better than anybody else's. They became the biggest auto manufacturer in the world. But innovation can overtake that. I mean, look at Tesla. Tesla's gone from almost a nobody to the biggest car company in the world in the space of about 4 or 5 years. So it's your people, right? It's that innovation, right? And this is amazing. This is I think is really powerful, but it begs a bigger question, or lots of questions. Well, what do I do? How do I do that? What can my people do? Right. And if you're thinking in these things, you're not alone. So this is just a little visualization I grabbed from Google of, what jobs are being replaced. Right. So if we were to go out there and say, well, what jobs are going to be replaced tomorrow? And we can kind of see some of the other ones in here as like, why are they being replaced by robots? How are they being replaced by technology, right? So there's a lot of things around here around the kind of the what and the how and the why, and a little bit of confusion, right? There's some reports out there saying, hey, Skynet's here, Armageddon, we're all going to lose our jobs, we're all going to be screwed. And there's others that it's like, can't do what a human does, no one's better than me. And some are maybe right, some are maybe wrong, but reality is it's probably somewhere in the middle. And if we look in the flip side of it, it's like, okay, I agree. This is coming. Jobs are going to be replaced, but then what? What do I do there? What jobs do I move my people into? What jobs are there for the future? What ones do I not have to worry about for 3 to 5 years or 10 years? How are the jobs that aren't going away? How are they going to change? Right. So there's lots of these questions that are going on. Right. So if we go back to this, it's a really powerful point, and it's something that we all really think about. And the real question is, well, okay, what do I do? And how do I get access to information and data that allows me to take advantage of that and to improve my workforce, make my people better each and every day? So what if we were to jump into, let's look at an example here, right? So if we say we have a client service representative, right? And if we go with our RPA, it's the first place. It's kind of two places where people are being displaced by technology and automation. Finance and CS, right? And it's those frontline, they're very repetitive tasks and they're easy to replace. So if we look at this here, what we're seeing the tech impact is 52% of this person's job is going to be replaced by automation tomorrow, right? As soon as you roll out RPA, this is going to replace 52% of that person's job. 10% of it is actually going to be augmented. And this is something that we don't talk about enough. Is like there's automation, there's technology. It's like, oh, it's taking away jobs, but then there's augmenting for jobs. And augmenting means you're going to their job's going to change and evolve. When we think of developers 10 years ago, 15 years ago, really long streams of code, lots of comments. They weren't really pulling code from lots of different places. They were kind of writing a lot of their own stuff. There was no auto checking or anything in the IDE. Fast forward now, it's not about troubleshooting. It's about brainstorming. How can I take this and put this together and all these different things? Like that job has massively evolved. It hasn't gone away, but it's been augmented by the advancements in IDEs where it's doing a lot of the remedial tasks behind the scenes. So that's really what augmenting is. And some jobs are going to be much more heavily augmented than they are automated. So long and the short of it is for this one, over the next 5 years, only 37% or a third of this job is going to remain. So, if you have 100 people, you only need 37 of them to continue doing this, if we were to kind of round out the numbers. So what if we were able to take this and say, okay, here's my client services rep. Where else in my organization over a pretty short, less than 12-month transition period, where could I transition them within the organization? And what could they do? Or where else could they go outside the organization if I wanted to give them a chance, a redeployment somewhere else and do things? It would be really useful if we could actually see that and kind of look at, all right, well, what are the kind of critical things for jobs of the future that people want to look at, right? What are the things that are necessary? We could break it down into these little bits. Now, historically, in order to be able to do this, you'd go work with a consultancy or work internally. You'd data gather. You'd start to understand, okay, my CS reps, what are they doing on a day-to-day basis? What skills do they have? Really hard, as I was kind of talking about before, what are the skills they have on a day-to-day versus what skills do they have just because they've been doing it as a hobby or a previous role? And it's really hard to capture both of those things, right? So it's kind of like, all right, well, that person, what do I do then? How do I bring all that together? How do I keep building this up to get a picture of, okay, this group of people can do this and I can move them over here? That might take 6 months to kind of figure out and do. And then outside of my organization, it's even harder. Like, how do I get these people ready to go? So you might bring in an offboarding agency that can help you and support you and say, okay, we can bring these people, we can retraining, we can upskill them. Let's make everyone a coder is what every politician's saying, right? And it's like, well, no, not everyone needs to be a coder. That's not necessarily the right track. But the bottom line is, this is very difficult to capture, right? It's very difficult to understand what's going on here in a time efficient manner, and then where can I move people to? And that's really where Faethm has stepped in. So that's really what we're doing here. So let me just go ahead and jump into our platform quickly here. And I'm going to walk you through how you can look at exactly what we were just seeing in real time. All right, that should be coming up shortly here. So what we're looking at here in Faethm is, what's the job impact for our customer service rep, right? Our client service representative we're seeing there. We can see that for specific technologies, in this case, we're just looking at a couple key technologies: predictive analytics, suggestive, and process automation, right? So just some key ones that are very focused to them. We're looking at our lower level employees, which are statistically the ones that are most likely going to be automated, are impacted by automation, I'll say. What's that impact going to be, right? So if we take a look at this here, we can see what that breakdown is for those individuals. Now, what we can also see on this is, okay, well, tellers are going to be, and we're looking at a bank in this case, so I should back up and say that. So we're looking at a bank, is tellers are also going to be impacted. And we can see across our entire organization what the impact of technology is going to be across every single role that's in here. Now, okay, that's really useful, but what do I do next, right? That's kind of the question we had. Now I know those people are going to be impacted. Let's go into what we call our job corridor. So job corridor is exactly what I was showing you on that slide, where you go build a report, you get some, spider graphs like that kind of show you, okay, this is where they're close, this is where they're similar, but that takes a lot of time. It's, you've already kind of made an assessment or, a gut decision that that's the role you want to go with. We now know, because we've looked at the data that's in Fathom, that a CS rep is, that's definitely someone who's going to be impacted. Well, we could see where else in the organization they could go. We could also come in here and take a look at our tellers and say, well, where else in the organization could those people go? What skills do they have? And we have our pivot scores over here. And the pivot score is basically looking at a couple different things. It's saying, okay, like for like, as far as kind of salary, right? We don't want someone to have to take a massive pay cut just because this role is going away. Where can we move them? And then we come down and actually look at, well, what are the skill gaps here? And what's the importance of different skills that we have in here? And we also can look at knowledge, abilities, and some of the more soft skill styles. Like to work inside, like to work outside. And we put this all together, and this goes into our pivot score. Now anything over kind of a 70 means, that's something that probably someone can move into with relative ease, talking maybe a couple months training here. Now, what you can do with that is, it's like, okay, well, if I'm rolling out RPA, it's probably going to take me 3 to 6 months to do that. I know these people are going to be eliminated. As we're rolling it out, let's move them into and train them up and move them into a new role. And what we can see is, again, the number of FTEs at risk, where else they could go within the organization. Or we could look external to the organization and say, okay, where else could I upskill them, right? If I'm going to do this, this is part of my corporate governance where I want to do good in the society. I can go and say, okay, I don't have these roles, but if I look at external, where could these people go? We can also flip this on its head and actually look at the other way around. We're working with an organization who they're going from an infrastructure organization to cloud, right? Big change. But what they were able to do is say, okay, let me go look at my cloud, right? Let's go look at cloud in general. These are organizations that are, I want a cloud DevOps engineer. Who within my organization can I bring in to be a cloud DevOps engineer? Again, with a pretty good pivot score here, and there's an FTE risk, right? So pretty low FTE risks for a lot of these folks, but I can look at this externally as well. So what this allows me to do is I can go out, instead of going after cloud DevOps engineers like every other organization that's trying to go into the cloud, I can go out and get some data storage folks. And actually, if we look at those, I can train them up pretty easily, right? I can go through and say, actually, they could do this job really easily, or a systems engineer, or a Linux engineer. And this actually lets me look at this. And I can say, okay, if I go out, I need 10 of these people. Everybody needs 10 of these people. Let me go out and find 10 people that are very similar, and I can put together a training plan over the first 2-3 months where everyone's getting ramped up anyway, and then transition them into that role. So it really kind of flips everything on its head as far as when we're looking at technology, we at Fathom start at the people first, right? What's the people impact? And we break everything down to the task level and then build it back up. And that's how we're able to kind of look at things from one side to the other. So I'll go ahead and stop there. Al, if you want to jump back on, I'm sure there's a couple questions that you may have or some of the folks have.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of questions I have, but I'm going to start with a compliment because, what I'm really taken aback, and I'm going to echo what I shared earlier, but in a different way, is that we have this level of complexity that many have just threw up their hands and said, I don't want to deal with it. And what I'm seeing you talk about is that we can actually talk about adjacencies. We can actually see where people are going to get upskilled, and we can prioritize that skill development so they're actually delivering value to the organization. And similarly, we can ask questions like, is that a winnable ask? If we want to train them, are they going to actually be successful? And that's just a more evolved way of approaching this notion of talent strategy. So, where I'm, again, I hear myself, given that I'm immersed in the space and I'm talking with people all day, every day about these topics, but it ultimately comes back to this reality, and I'd be interested in your thoughts on this, is that the organizational readiness for these types of solutions has not been there. It has, there's a lot of learning that has to be done by executives, people who have been enrolled 30 years, give or take, and they haven't grown up with these technologies. So what are you finding when you're going to market, you're talking to CHROs and heads of talent and talent acquisition and so forth? What are you hearing, and what are some of the resistors or barriers to adopting not only a solution like Faethm, but adopting an approach that's more systematic and well-rounded?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and it's kind of theme really. It's kind of it's more than just one question. There is, and the way I kind of look at it is, for any of this technology, to your point, if people have been in roles for 30 years, where what we're assessing and what we're looking at is difficult for them to even to grasp and to understand. So if I can't explain it to my dad, who's one of those folks, I haven't hit the nail on the head. So that's usually where I start.
Yeah.
But there's a couple different things, right? And the reason why I kind of started off at the beginning with walking through the traditional ways, we initially went to market and said, look, we're a scenario planning tool. Great, be like, great. What are the 2 or 3 scenarios that you're going to help me figure out? It's like, no. Before that, you were making those decisions based on very loose information and data because you don't truly understand who your people are or what you have. You're like, all right, I've got a lot of those people. I see other companies are kind of downsizing in that area, so I'm just going to focus there. It's a little bit of follow the leader, but cautiously. And I think a lot of organizations, to your point of readiness, a lot of organizations are kind of partway through their plans, but a bigger chunk of organizations were about to start their 3 to 5 year journey, even looking at this. And then the pandemic happened.
Right.
And all of a sudden, their 5 year plans, now a 5-month plan.
Yeah, right.
We have to understand this stuff yesterday. What do we do? What's RPA?
Yep.
What's this? What's that? How do we do all these things? Right. And that's, it's understanding kind of what's out there. And I think what the amazing thing is with what we've been able to build here at Faethm is it's this layer in between of data and clarity where you can start to very quickly understand who your people are, what you have, right? Going back to that quote I had up there is, it's your people are your biggest asset. And most organizations don't understand what they have and who they have and how they can help them, right? To even start at that point. One bank we were talking to, like they had 600 people in their IT organizations and 400 different job titles. So if McKinsey were to come in and do, just pick McKinsey, they were to come in and do an analysis, it's like, well, okay, man, where do we even start with this? But we're able to kind of take that and distill that down to our what we have and make sense of what's there. And that's the first starting point is like, where are you now, right? What is your appetite for change for the entire organization? And what's the impact of that going to be? And now you have a starting place of understanding, right? And I think that's the biggest thing is like, yes, there's a lot of people that we don't understand this or we don't understand that. But if we break it down to its parts, it's like, all right, where are we? Where do we want to get to as a business? And what are the things we can do that impact it, both positive and negatively, unintentionally, but may? And that's kind of the path forward with a lot of this stuff.
Got it. And you just touched on it a bit, and I can write my own answer here. But at the end of it, who is your buyer and who are your users? They might not be the same, but who do you see saying, okay, we're going to prioritize this investment and we're going to do so to empower these people? Who are
they? So we're dealing with human capital, right? So it's always going to come back to the CHRO, right? In some capacity or their team. But what we've been able to do is to give a common language for IT and CIOs and CFOs to talk with HR about people, about how do we invest in our people? What can we do? The IT folks and CFOs, they're data people, right? They want numbers, they want things, and they want a great, how did you get to, this is how why I should invest $1 million in an L&D plan? Well, here's how I got to it, and this is why. CHROs have never been able to walk into a boardroom with that level of clarity and detail and data to back it up. So they're typically, the CHRO is typically our buyer, but there's a lot of other people that benefit from it. And depending on the organization, we've started with L&D programs where they've used this like, we need to go revamp everything. We don't know where to start.
Yep.
But ultimately, everything leads back to, who's in charge of your people, and that's your CHRO. But we create this common language and vernacular across the organization, so everyone ultimately can benefit from leveraging the platform.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited for what you have, what you're offering and what you have in store. Because as I've shared today, there's a lot of runway and not only people analytics, but for lack of a better term, talent market analytics or labor market analytics from a recruiting perspective, internal mobility perspective, designing work and capacity of the workforce. So I'm really, excited again of what the future holds for you all. So going into 2021, I mean, what's next for you all? I know you have a push here in the U.S. I know you have folks in Australia. So what's in store for the next year?
Yeah, no, really exciting stuff. So, looking to really increase our presence here in the Americas, and the from the platform standpoint, one of the things we're working on is future capabilities, right? So I kind of alluded to it a little bit with, what's a role going to look like in the future, even if it's augmented, or one of the banks we were talking to, again, financial services is, they're traditional innovators, and so not surprised that they're the first ones to put their hand up and say, hey, let's take a look at that.
Mm-hmm.
But they have two roles right now that do two very distinct things. One's more soft skills, one's more hard skills around loans and things. And ultimately, they want that to be one role, especially with a lot of loans becoming under stress due to the pandemic and all these things. So they were like, all right, rather than let those default, what can we do, from the human side of things? That's distinctly two roles right now, but it's like, all right, well, do I need four of these and one of those? Like, what makes a good team? And then ultimately, how do those become one hybrid role in the future? We've seen this with a lot of other, throughout the years, kind of like a lot of different, like you had hardcore dev people and then project managers. And now a lot of developers are kind of thinking from a project standpoint. We look at sprint cycles and all these things. So this happens all the time. It's like roles evolve and change. And this is kind of one of those things where everyone's like, well, what are the skills of the future? What's the framework I need to look at? And so we're developing that, and we're looking at, all right, how do you take your people from where they are, and how are these roles going to evolve and change, and how do you help your people keep up with that?
Yeah. And at the end of it, if I'm hearing you correctly, it's not only benefiting the organization, it's benefiting the people within it.
Yeah.
And they're learning investments in terms of time and money have a higher probability of reaping the desired return. I'm really interested in this hybrid role because I think you're spot on. And I also, believe that as soon as these jobs get defined, they're going to shift it and move faster than ever before. So this perpetual change is going to be normal. It's just so how then can organizational leaders adapt consciously? And, I'll just say that if they're not using a tool like this or a set of tools and associated processes, then what are they doing? They guessing or the data needs to be part of the decision-making process. So, again, kudos to you and your team, and look forward to hearing what you have in store in the months and years ahead. So
Absolutely.
How can people learn more about Faethm and you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Faethm AI, faethm.ai is our website. We're sharing a lot of stuff on LinkedIn right now. We haven't announced it yet, but we're going to have a webinar in the early part of next year, taking the data that we have and looking at it from a D&I perspective, right?
All
What's
right.
the impact of technology on D&I and minorities and gender differences, and we did it in Australia, and one really interesting thing that came out is women are more susceptible to their roles being automated, but a lot of them are actually have the skill sets to go into new roles more so than the men that are being automated away.
Wow.
So it's kind of interesting, right? So we have a paper coming out around that as well. But if info at faethm.ai, and we can get you some of that. Also reach out to myself, Stephen.Farrell at Faethm AI. More than happy to talk to anybody who's interested in what they looked at, how we got there, what the data is, how they may be able to leverage it. There's really no company too big or too small to leverage this. We got the New South Wales Stock Exchange only has 600 people, and they've been leveraging it for 3 years.
Wow.
And so it's, if there's change in your business or about to be change, whether that's growth, shrinking, whatever the case is, bring in technology. We give you the data to understand what that's going to be, what that impact is going to be.
No, I mean, most businesses are in a static state. They're all good right now.
Yeah, nothing's changing whatsoever.
Whatsoever.
Yeah,
No.
yeah.
Yeah, the time is right. That's the reason we picked up on this theme right before the end of the year, because obviously a lot of planning is happening. We'll continue to plan early in the new year. So again, Stephen, thank you very much, and you be well, and happy holidays, and we'll see you in the new year. Yeah.
You as well. Thanks a lot.
All right. Bye.